Card King, here I come. Hello, music fans, music collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program from the popular 1980s legendary pop icon music group. We welcome in Jack Hues of Wang Chung. Jack, great to have you. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So there's a lot happening in your world, Jack, at the moment with your touring schedule. And also this year marks the 40th anniversary of Wang Chung's Point of the Curb album, which featured the number one dance single, Dance Hall Days song, which is, truly a fan favorite. And, I wanted to go back a little bit. When you guys first recorded Dance Hall Days, did you have a good feeling that that would be such a phenomenal hit with the audience?
I don't think you ever know, or I don't anyway, as a writer. You just think, well, this is the next song I've written. But I did notice that, unlike previous songs, our publishers were very excited about it. I guess our deal with Geffen Records, we were signed direct to Geffen in Los Angeles, and that was kind of predicated on Dance Hall Days, So it definitely felt like, that song was raising us up in the echelons of the business, But recording it we recorded in Abbey Road Studio 2 in London, which is where the Beatles recorded all their albums. And that was a very deliberate thing. Nick and I are both Beatles heads, and so was Chris Hughes, who was producing the album as well. And, we were very much aware of being in this sort of, what's the word, succession of bands, if you like, that had worked in that studio. And during the process of recording Dance Hall Days, we actually met Paul McCartney as well, because we used one of his basses on one of the overdub sessions that we did. So that was incredible. When I look back at it now, it just feels totally magical,
Yeah, I mean that's that song and so many of your songs bring so much lasting memories, and it's such a part of the fabric of the world today that we live in. I mean that just goes to show you the work you did, how fabulous it still stands today. I mean, you guys left a mark in American pop culture.
Yeah, that is just mind blowing to me, but something that I want, as a kid, and especially when you're a musician as well. Success is obviously great as it manifests itself, at the time and the money and stuff. And not we were fabulously wealthy or anything, but it enabled us to work as professional musicians, But it's the respect of your peers is very important, I think. But even more so, this kind of enduring sense of being part of something, And I think pop culture or pop music or popular music, I don't know what you call it when you're trying to describe everything across the board from Elvis in 56 to Radiohead, but being part of that incredible sort of artistic outpouring that happened from the sort of 56 to 2006 or something like that. It's incredible to feel part of that and to feel recognized for it as well. It's a great privilege.
Definitely is. And now fast forward to the modern times, Jack, in which you've done solo work, including a current single you put out, I would say about a year ago, The Brooding Since 2017. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing, I write songs all the time, I guess in periodic chunks. Since 2017, that was a song that I wrote that was inspired by the sort of rising interest in the UFO subject, or UAP subject as it's now called, I think last year there was quite a sort of concentration of activity in that area with this guy David Grush talking about it in Congress, and even some congressional moves to make it a sort of companies that had worked in that area, especially with what they call crash retrievals, that those companies were now obliged to disclose what they knew and what they had, I mean, it's an involved subject, certainly, but it's something I've been interested in since the sort of late 90s, and I find it a fascinating subject. And on a broader sense, the idea that we're alone in the universe has always seemed kind of absurd to me, and now the sense that it could be entering much more into the mainstream, at least the discussion of those things, that inspired me to write this song, and I just wanted to release it last year because it seemed very relevant at that particular time.
And, as you know, Jack, it's always been a controversial subject. Scientists and astronomers, I would guess, they express varying degrees of enthusiasm for the possibility of, aliens on Earth. Do you personally believe there's aliens on Earth and flying saucers scattering the universe?
Yes, I do. I think there's enough evidence to suggest that, that we do, or, humans are interacting with what they call non-human intelligence. Quite what it is, I'm not sure. Obviously, the standard idea is that they're interplanetary, but these days I think a lot of people think that it's from the oceans. But there's enough of this Earth. Although we as humans, especially in the West, we think we've got it all figured out and we've explored everything and we know what's going on. But there's so many anomalies and so many holes in the information that we have. So I think almost certainly there's some sort of interaction with NHI, non-human intelligence, and UAPs are so well documented, really. I know it's not in the mainstream, but I think we all know, that the mainstream tries to protect you from knowledge as much as it tries to give it to you. So that's putting it as politely as I can. So but it's because it's so sort of mysterious and continues to be so. I find it ever fascinating as a subject.
Yeah, definitely fascinating. We're talking with Jack Hues of Wang Chung, who's with us on the telephone line. Now, Jack, during the mid-'80s, I mean, you also put out that phenomenal hit, Everybody Have Fun Tonight, a song that was released in the Mosaic album in 1986. Talk a little bit about the process, if you can go back a little bit, making that album.
Yeah. Well, I guess, as you mentioned, we had Points on the Curve, which had Dance for Days, Don't Let Go on it. They were both hits, and Dance for Days particularly a big sort of international hit. So the pressure's then on from the record label. I mean, they're business guys, so they're kind of like, okay, so you've had a hit, now just do that again. But as an artist, you can't just sort of recreate that same mood, because everything is, that's a big subject to talk about as well, but it's almost like a sort of channeling experience. It comes from somewhere through you and out into the world, and you're not even really writing it in the way that perhaps we all understand. But, we were sort of, really challenged by coming up with the next hit single. And at that point, that's where To Live and Die in LA came in. Bill Friedkin got in touch with us, and so we went off on this journey and wrote the soundtrack and all of that stuff, So then the following year, that was 85, To Live and Die in LA. 86, we were back in the studio with the same kind of blank canvas in front of us of like, okay, a hit record. And back in those days, Nick and I used to get together. We wrote separately, really, but we come up with ideas, but we get together every month and just sit and play each other what we were working on, what we were liking, And I remember towards the end of one of the sessions, Nick said, I've kind of got this idea, and played me the chorus of Everybody Have Fun Tonight, or the sort of line. And I said, I love that. And he was like, really? I thought you'd hate that, because it's so kind of obvious, if you know what I mean. But no, I loved it. And in the process of that, I came up with this sort of ad-lib line, Everybody Have Fun Tonight, Everybody Wang Chung Tonight, which was a bit of a sort of placeholder thing, But when we worked with Peter Wolf, our producer, he was like, oh, that's the best line in the song. And I was like, no, we're going to change that and get that sort of more refined. But no, he was insistent that we up the tempo and make it a party record, and that was the chorus, which was a great decision, So it's been a sort of 40-year marketing campaign, really, which we're proud of.
Yeah, if I recall, around 1986, it was Christmas week, in which Everybody Have Fun Tonight peaked at number 2, and it was in the top 100 Billboard charts around the country, if I recall.
Yeah. That's right.
Yes, I
There
mean
was an alternative chart called Cashbox in those days as well, and we actually hit number one there. I think it was us and the Bangles, was it, who were sort of vying for that number one spot, and I think they picked us to it on Billboard, but we beat them on Cashbox. So,
no, you guys were on
anyway,
top. No question
number
about it.
two is good.
No, you guys were on top, and I wanted to ask you, since it's such a competitive industry, if you go back to the mid-'80s when you guys were on top, was there a lot of jealousy you felt, Jack, amongst the, your competitors at that time?
I don't know about jealousy, but certainly it was competitive, and it felt quite sort of edgy. You were being judged all the time by your peers and by the industry, and I know Everybody Have Fun Tonight, was considered to be a sort of, I don't know, like a real pop record, and with all, success is great, but if people are into sort of art, then they're a bit suspicious about success, So it's a double-edged thing all the time, But I think what's interesting about now is that everything is sort of blurred into this sense of the 80s, as being like one thing. Of course, at the time, all the bands were very different, from each other. Us from Frankie Goes to Hollywood or Tears for Fears or Duran Duran, do you know what I mean? And everyone was in their separate lane, kind of battling it as best they could, But now I think there's this overall sense of the 80s, and in that sense, I think Wang Chung's music sort of holds up as a kind of continuum that threads through all of that. And I think the music has stood the test of time as well, which is why I guess Dance All Days has been used in this new Amazon Prime movie called The Idea of You, and Why to Live and Die in LA is in this new John Mulaney series that's on Netflix. It's a sort of comedy sort of interview show, and he uses To Live and Die in LA as his intro music and throughout the show.
Yeah, I mean, if I go back to the early 80s, mid-'80s, I mean, you had like the Ramones that brought out that, in America, that brought out that punk, the punk rock genre. But then we hear your music and, it was totally a different vibe, that I felt or that everyone felt, I would assume in America, that British new wave like invasion.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, Britain had the punk explosion in the late 70s, or sort of 77 onwards, I suppose. We had the Sex Pistols and the Clash and those bands, and the Ramones, I guess, were finding it difficult in the US, but they came to the UK, and these English punk bands loved the Ramones, and kind of their success, in a sense, stemmed out of them sort of breaking so big in the UK. And Nick and I we met during that time, and the first bands we had were sort of punk, very punk inspired, although, Nick's idea of punk was quite punk with jazz chords, sort of thing, which was great, But I think there was then a kind of mini reaction to that in the UK, and all of us, when I say all of us, I'm thinking of the bands, Tears for Fears, Adam and the Ants, who'd grown up. We'd grown up in the 70s. We'd grown up with Bowie. We'd grown up with Zeppelin. We'd grown up with Yes and Genesis and these progressive Pink Floyd, And so there was this sort of, you were kind of educated musically by all of that stuff, whether you liked it or not, And the whole punk thing of, 3 chords and the truth, or quite often 1 chord and the truth, it goes so far, but then you've got to move on, And so I think Wang Chung hit this nice wave that was, new wave as it was called, where there was scope to sort of expand the music, but you were sort of out of the 70s thing, where it was like slightly, that did feel like a sort of big dinosaur era that was past, and there was a freshness to the way we approached writing and stuff in the early 80s especially, that was a light, slightly informed by, like I say, Floyd and Zeppelin and that stuff. But really, the punk had refreshed everything a lot, and there was a sense of it being reborn. And I think that's part of what makes the British invasion band so appealing in America, because there was this freshness and youthful kind of quality to it all.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely appealing. And, Jack, you mentioned one of the songs that you guys did, To Live and Die in L.A., a song, in my opinion, that's, gets, it's really underplayed. It doesn't get much recognition, but I have a little sample that I want to play, and maybe we can talk about how you created this tune. Let's hear To Live and Die in L.A. To Live and Die in L.A., Wang Chung. I mean, this is a song that, for me, I feel it's underrated. What do you think about this song? I mean, you have that, and we just played To Live and Die in L.A., a single from the soundtrack of the same name by the English new wave band Wang Chung, released in September 25th, 1985. The song peaked on the Billboard Top 100 at number 41. Now, this was a quote by Cashbox at the time, which said that song melded its own synthetic dance fusion with a clear-cut pop sensibility. Jack, we lost you there. Thanks for calling back. But we just heard To Live and Die in L.A., and I was just reading a quote by Cashbox, which said that, it melds its own synthetic dance fusion, and it has, alluring and ultimately triumphant beats. How did you create that song?
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack was an amazing project to do, and I remember Bill Friedkin saying to us quite definitively in the first conversation that we had about doing the score, I don't want a song called To Live and Die in L.A. I want a load of instrumental stuff that I can use, to soundscape the film, And but when I saw the first rough cut of the film, because I'm sure people know all these stories, but we didn't see the movie before we wrote the music. We just had this long conversation with Billy Friedkin, who's the director. And but when he flew us over to LA and we watched the rough cut of the film, I was so blown away by it. But we went back to the UK, and the song just kind of came out. I didn't will it to do that, But I just sort of thought this is such an amazing project for us, In terms of the actual writing, those sounds, I guess. Music was driven by, it has always, I think, been driven by technology, and there was a whole new generation of synthesizers and samplers that were coming up at that time. And that kind of fluty sound, you'll hear that on Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. He used that for the solo part of that song, But yeah, I was just messing around with the synthesizer, and sort of came up with that thing. The song's quite an interesting song in that my A&R guy at the time, John Kolodner, I remember playing it to him, and he sort of was getting into it, that whole front section, and then the chorus kind of stops and is much gentler, and he was like, it goes down in the chorus, and he couldn't quite get his head around why I would do that, because obviously the right way to do it, in inverted commas, is the chorus goes up, but I think in a way people kind of get that, and it's surprising the number of people that come up to me and say, when we're doing the live shows, it's like my favourite Wang Chung songs, To Live and Die in LA, and maybe that's because, with Dance All Days and Everybody Have Fun Tonight, it sort of ran down your throat, that kind of the way commercial music is, but To Live and Die in LA, if you come across that, you come across it yourself, and if you like it and respond to it, you found it yourself, and I think that's always a great experience with rock music, pop music, whatever you want to call it. The things that you discover for yourself are precious to you.
Yeah, that song is very soothing, for me when I listen to it. I think it's a great song. Now, you're also promoting the Clear Light, Dark Matter Greatest Hits, which will be released this year, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're planning, we hope to have it out as we speak, but in the nature of these things, it all takes longer. So probably late August, September, so that it's going to be a double album, double vinyl album. The first album will be the hits, as we know and love them, and hopefully not hopefully, it will go back into the very first album we did where the band's name was spelt differently, the Huang version of Wang. Album 2 will be outtakes and tracks that have never been released before, or if they have, severely neglected, So the very first song that we ever released in the UK will be on there. Isn't it about time we were on TV? We'll have the demo of Dance All Days, and some stuff that literally was discovered in the last month or two when we'll be going through some of the archives in the vaults at Universal.
And Jack, now you also have plans for Wang Chung's orchestral concert, from what I understand?
Yeah. I don't know how we're going to fit that in this year. It stems from the album that we did in 2019, which we called Orchesography. And that's, in a sense, another sort of hits album in that we recorded the hits with an orchestra. But we also did some lesser-known tracks there's particularly a track from Taser Up, which is our 2012 album, a track called Overwhelming Feeling, where we really put the orchestra center stage, and I think that really works well. With the orchestral album, that was our objective, to not use the orchestra as a sort of elaborate synth in the background, but to really try and use orchestral colors to bring the songs up, So yeah, doing that live will be a real thrill, and we're trying to plan that for a sort of UK date at the end of the year.
So those two items are, in the pipeline. Now talk a little bit about this Abducted by the 80s tour. I have a few minutes left.
Sure. So Abducted by the 80s came out of our experience of working on these 80s package tours, for want of a better word, where essentially you get 20 minutes to play your hits, which I'm fine with, and you get to play nice big auditoriums and to loads of people, who get to connect the dots a little bit about Wang Chung, because we are such an eclectic band, I think. But Abducted by the 80s, we decided it would be us and some like-minded bands. So we chose the Motels, Naked Eyes, and Men Without Hats, all of whom are bands, who've got big hits, but also have a kind of very musical sense of approaching stuff and deep cuts as well. So we wanted to create a tour that was a mixture of nostalgia for your 80s hits that you know and love, but also takes you on a bit of a musical journey. And I think that's very much the Wang Chung experience. When people hear us play the longer sets, they get to hear Space Junk or Hypnotize Me, or songs that they're familiar with, but maybe haven't connected with Wang Chung directly.
And I from looking at your website, I see that you're in New Jersey next week or in 2 weeks. You're also in Florida. So those are the two major states, right, on the East Coast or Northeast?
Yeah. Absolutely, now, we haven't done gigs in the Northeast for quite a while.
Oh, yes. I was going to say, so now are you ever going to perform in California, since the station is in California?
Sure. We're doing some gigs. We're going to be doing the Lost 80s shows in California on I think it's the 23rd in San Diego, 24th in LA of August. And we're sort of going up the West Coast. So we're going to be there. It's not going to be Abducted by the 80s, but Lost 80s is cool. You get a lot of bands for your buck. And, we'll be there. I think that's at the Peacock Theatre in LA. So you have to check the website for lost80s.com, but I think it's the 24th of August that we're there.
All right, so the West Coast, we will await Wang Chung soon to come. And my final question, do you miss the 80s, Jack? You miss those times in music?
It seems in retrospect like an easier, more beautiful world, but I think we were preoccupied then, with people like Reagan as Prime Minister, President. That's absurd. He's an actor. So all of the same old kind of political stuff going on. I guess these days it does feel a bit more dangerous than it did then. Do I miss the 80s? No, I like where we are. I love my kids. I've got grandkids now. I love where Wang Chung is. I feel very grateful to be in a good place in my life.
Excellent work. Listen, can't wait to see the band. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
It's a pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me on. It's been great. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Jack Hues of Wang Chung.
All right.
Until next week, happy collecting to all.